Good evening, good morning, good night, or good afternoon, everyone. Charles Ortel, and I'm back with a special broadcast today, Sunday, the 23rd of July. Charles, New York, there you are. Welcome back.
It's a pleasure to be back, and happy summer to all of you.
Likewise, it's a pleasure to have you back. Let's not waste any time. I know for a fact that you went to Washington, D.C. this week, and I'll give you ample time to walk us through the hearings you attended. But let me first, and we know, by the way, I know that you have a sleeve up your arm, or an ace up your sleeve as well. You just gave it to us now right before we started. But first, let's hear Representative James Comer and some of his closing remarks on Thursday.
Your investigation that you spent years of your life on, that we've spent 6 months investigating, where you see a pattern of suspicious activity, where money flows from shady foreign companies and from shady foreign nationals through shell companies that are then laundered, and that's according to 6 different banks in the suspicious activity reports, laundered down in incremental payments to the Biden family for things that we have no idea what they did to receive the money. And as part of that years-long investigation, the FBI is sitting on the whole time a document that alleges Joe Biden and Hunter Biden took a $5 million bribe from a Ukrainian oligarch, where there are bank records that show that the Bidens were receiving money from this entity. There was already evidence there to show that. Now, I don't know whether that allegation is true or not. I know the FBI never investigated it, and what we know from today, they never communicated with the IRS criminal division that spent years investigating this. So there's 2 things that's happening here with the Oversight Committee with respect to the President of the United States. There's the investigation of the Biden corruption, and there's the investigation of the cover-up.
Welcome to the mad world of U.S. politics, or Biden politics, I should say. I don't know where you want to start now, Charles. Should we go to the latest bombshell that you found?
Well, yes. Well, let me give some context. In the United States, and I don't know the Norwegian tax system, but in the United States, the IRS has awesome resources. Also, the FBI has awesome resources. And if you're going to engage in any kind of attempted criminal behavior involving more than $10,000, you have several grave difficulties to confront, in that anytime you wire money, anytime you try to deposit sums of $10,000 or more, banks get very suspicious, and they are forced now, following Madoff and following many other swindles, they're forced to file what are called suspicious activity reports. This is before you get to the IRS opening a criminal investigation, before the FBI gets involved. Once that happens, there are massive electronic files, typically, that the IRS and the FBI don't share with the public, because their investigation could go down a lot of blind alleys. So in the case of Biden corruption, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to look at Joe Biden when he was a senator back in when he was nominated to be vice president in August of 2008. There is a resource called taxnotes.com that has his tax returns going back to 1998. And unlike the Clintons, it has the federal tax return and also the state tax returns. Those are significant because the Clintons, for example, declared residence in New York, which has its own bevy of very strict regulations and tax forms. The Clintons have not revealed their state taxes. The Bidens have. So when you look from 2008 to 2016, what you see is the Biden family made around $300,000 a year, which may sound like a lot of money, but it's not that much money if you're putting Hunter and Bo and others prior to that through expensive private schools and law schools, if you've got multiple residents, if you've got a mortgage, a large mortgage on your principal residence, $300,000 disappears pretty quickly after tax. Well, magically in 2017, I retrieved this return yesterday, and I just shared it with you folks moments ago. When you look at that return, after many years of just making $300,000, magically in 2017, the Bidens make almost $10 million. Now remember, $10 million is the amount of money that Comer suspects. 1032, the FBI disclosure, talks about a $5 to $10 million bribery scheme. In 2017, the first year of Biden's post-vice presidency, the family declares almost $10 million of income. The biggest slice of that, 9.1 million, according to the return, comes from some entity that is formed January 31st, 2017. So that's roughly 11 days after Biden leaves his vice presidential residence. 11 days later, they form this thing called CelticCapri. And in its first 11 months of operations, CelticCapri yields the Biden family $9.1 million. Now, I've been in business since 1980. I do not know, and I know quite a few successful people, I do not know a single example of a startup company that in its first 11 months of operation can yield $9.1 million to a bumblehead. I mean, Joe Biden has no business experience, nothing relevant to offer any capitalist. He does have deep political connections around the world, so it's logical to assume that he might have gotten 9.1 million in 17 for some favor that he had been doing in prior years when he was either a senator or vice president or both. And you have to, the paperwork actually for CelticCapri is available online in the state of Delaware. Well, the FBI and the IRS should have been digging into this by 2017 when the first suspicions came to light about Hunter Biden's business dealings. In addition, there's another company called Geir, which yielded in 2017 $500,000 to Joe Biden. What did he do to get 500 plus 9.1 million in 2017? And mind you, Geir was created March 15th, 2017. That's when James Comey was still head of the FBI. So a serious investigation by Comer and by investigative journalists around the world should focus on these two entities alone. What did the FBI, what did the IRS know about CelticCapri and Geir? What steps did they take in their investigation, which they say began, or John Solomon alleges began as early as 2017? What did they find out about CelticCapri and Geir in Hunter Biden's laptop? What most, in my looking at prior FBI investigations, which I've done in the Clinton Foundation, they outline a plan of attack typically in the early memoranda that lay out what they're going to do. And they say, they have a series of crimes that they say may have been committed, and then they allocate resources at various field offices to get to the bottom of what happened. And they list out who they're coordinating the investigations with. Well, now we have whistleblowers from the inside, multiple whistleblowers. I was there in Washington, D.C. with Jason Goodman. These people seem highly credible. They are alleging, in part, that the FBI and the IRS pulled their punches, that they didn't look at the heart of the matter. So why didn't they do that? Who are they protecting? Are they protecting just Joe Biden, or are they protecting Barack Obama and others in the Obama administration who watched, my working theory is, who watched the Clinton Foundation, the Clintons, do the same thing that Joe did in 2017. In 2000, Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton were technically bankrupt. They had massive legal bills they couldn't foot, and George W., in Hillary's words, was selected president in December 2000. Magically, in 2001, Bill and Hillary's income went from nothing, a couple $100,000, into the 10 plus million range. What did they do in 2001 to merit such a dramatic step up in their income? And how much of that benefit that they derived in 2001 was pre-positioned when Bill was still president? So do we have a pattern and practice in America of powerful presidents, powerful administrations, corrupt people deciding that while they're president, they're going to line their pockets. They're going to position their families to line their pockets in their post-presidency. And is Joe Biden doing nothing more than emulating what the Clintons did and what the Bushes did and what other former presidents have done? So we have a massive corruption problem in this country. We have a massive problem with the FBI and the IRS protecting dynastic political families. And we have a massive problem with mainstream journalists wanting to maintain access to these dynastic political families and pulling their punches, not going after Biden, indeed protecting Biden, and attacking Trump ferociously. I mean, the double standard is something that I hope historians in time, after passions have cooled, will really delve into and examine and ensure, one hopes, that the investigative journalists around the world become empowered to shine the sunlight on the dark and dank stench of corruption, which now exists at the heart of global governance.
It's overwhelming. We've been following, or Norwegian viewers, readers, have had their chance to follow, at least get the cream off the congressional hearings that you and Jason attended. But other than that, I checked this morning, there's not been one word on these hearings and on the new evidence, the whistleblowers from IRS has not been mentioned in any other media outlet than Document.no, maybe Document SE and DK and News as well. And that's why I chose to call, and I'm going to call the story, or call this program, Charles Ortel on the Biden Taboo. So my next question is then, why? I mean, you wrote in a tweet, and I will post the link to your Twitter account in the story following this broadcast. But you wrote somewhere that leading Democrats now must understand that the Bidens and Kamala Harris are more toxic than Fukushima.
They are. They are. And, we're in a quiet period now, at least in America, where families across the country, and we have different climates here in the South, where a lot of people live, school children start going back to their next year in August. And so that means that families have to begin back to school shopping and getting your kids through to doctors and dentists and all that kind of stuff. And so we're distracted, bottom line. And a lot of journalists choose, as the top administrative officials do as well, a lot of them choose to take much of August off. So all this news is dropping. It's serious news. If we were talking about Trump, there would be mobs surrounding the White House demanding action. If the tidbits on Biden had been the same as for Trump when he was president, there would have been demands for impeachment, conviction, put him in Gitmo, round up the family. With Trump, at least you have somebody who was very rich. His father was rich. His grandfather was rich. So he's somebody who's very rich and built a fortune further during his presidency. It's easy to understand why in his post-presidency, Donald Trump would make money. It is impossible to understand why so many hapless, crooked, drug addict, addled members of the Biden family, how they could get all these windfalls, have all these mansions, lead all these extravagant lifestyles. It's impossible. There's no good reason to take Hunter Biden, run him through Yale Law School, give him a senior position at MBNA, a credit card company, and then have him be the finder and fixer, get him involved in Ukraine. And recently, actually, after the hearings, the whistleblower hearings, someone released a tape or an account of the crooked oligarch Zlochevsky saying that he believed Hunter Biden was dumber than Zlochevsky's dog. Well, Joe Biden, on the other hand, says that Hunter Biden's the smartest person he knows, and therein lies perhaps the problem, but with the Biden family. But we have the spectacle. It's just obvious that Joe Biden has been for sale. Comer went out after the remarks that you put up there he did an appearance with Ted Cruz, where he suggested, as I believe, that Biden has been on the take since his Senate days. And on that point, people in the financial crisis, we haven't really fully investigated how many politicians were on the take leading up to the 2008, 7, 8, 9 crisis. And I say that because every senator and every congressperson has to maintain typically 2 residences. Joe doesn't. Joe commuted from his Delaware mansion. I guess he followed that up by getting a second beach house mansion. But how do you do that on a salary of $175,000? The answer is, prior to the credit crisis, you get a friendly lender like Angelo Mazzillo at Countrywide, a company that blew up spectacularly. He broke the rules for these senators and these House members and gave them special mortgages that the public couldn't get. Well, that's a gift. That should have been disclosed. Similarly, I suspect that crooked credit card companies could arrange to issue credit cards to dynastic political families that either don't have to be repaid at all or are charged out on very concessionary terms. And I think there needs to be a very serious investigation by nonpartisan, decidedly nonpartisan people. You got to find investigators whose families have nothing to do with either political party. And you got to have those people do this by the book and audit every senator, every representative, every cabinet member, and understand, and their families, and understand how these crooks, for paltry sums, I mean, if you could basically buy Joe Biden even for $100 million as the Chinese, think how many benefits the Chinese have derived from this hapless Biden administration. They now have, instead of having a hornet's nest in our bases in Afghanistan, we exit Afghanistan and they take them over. Instead of having us aggressively push, as Trump did, economically, politically, militarily, have this in the Biden administration retreating on world stage and leaving power vacuums for the Chinese to fill. In Ukraine, and why the United States has decided, of all places, that we want to focus on Ukraine when we have an open southern border with criminals cascading and terrorists likely cascading across our border, fomenting mayhem already in this country. Who knows what will happen through the election? Why are we sending over $100 billion to Ukraine? And where's the audit of that money? How much of that money actually hits the Ukraine government, and how much of it is siphoned off by Zelensky and other oligarchs? These are fair questions, and of course our mainstream press isn't asking any of these things. We're not wondering, where is the Ukrainian counteroffensive that we paid so much money for? How could it be going well if we have no reports of success? Are we sure that we're supporting democracy in Ukraine when Zelensky has canceled elections, when he's jailing his critics? He recently fired his ambassador to the UK because he made modest criticism. Are we really supporting democracy in Ukraine, or are we supporting oligarchies and autocracy and criminal behavior? And by the way, who paid off? Who is behind Burisma? And when did the project to get the Biden family involved in Burisma actually begin? How deep are ties of the Biden family inside Ukraine? And when Joe Biden was vice president, who on his staff had points on Ukraine and on China? And is it possible that the person who had point on those issues is the very same person who became a, quote, whistleblower against Donald Trump over Donald Trump's call to ask Zelensky to probe corruption in his country, particularly corruption involving American politicians? These are all fair questions.
Of course, you have now listed at least 10, 15 fair questions, Charles, and thank you for that. I mean, this you ought to have your own daily show, but unfortunately, we don't have room for having you on every day. And we'll leave. You need some time to do the digging, as we know that you are doing. But let me go back to the IRS or the whistleblower hearings that you and Jason attended. One thing came to mind when you spoke about it, and we saw those two guys, the two whistleblowers, in the clip earlier on in the broadcast. Didn't Biden approve a bill that for 37,000 new employees to the IRS?
The number is 87,000 new. And I think there's one fertile ground that really needs to be investigated. And if it takes 87,000 IRS agents to do it, let's have them come in. And that's the area of not-for-profits. Because not-for-profit, it sounds good. I'm involved with a not-for-profit. Oh, aren't you noble? Isn't that wonderful? But the fact is, if not-for-profits are not actually policed, they are a bonanza. It's a gold mine for grifters. Because, if you're giving money away in a not-for-profit, people will say, well, I don't really need to check that too carefully. The donors didn't need the money, so they gave it to the nonprofit, and now the nonprofit is saying that it's doing great work in Africa. How am I going to check that work? It's impossible to get to the places they say they're operating. And the scale of the not-for-profit industry in the United States of America, some estimate it's over $1 trillion a year, more like $2 trillion a year of giving. And that the assets in nonprofits, who knows what they are at this moment, but they're $5–10 trillion of assets. You think of places like Harvard, Yale, and other university systems that have massive endowments. These are not-for-profits. And nobody's checking to make sure, based on the work that I've been doing with you and others, nobody's checking the obvious discrepancies when, let's say, the World Health Organization through Unitaid gives the Clinton Foundation a couple $100 million in 2008, but the Clinton Foundation in 2007 and 8, but the Clinton Foundation only declares that it received $100 million. Nobody stops to ask, well, wait a minute, where'd the other $100 million go? Did Hillary Clinton perhaps use any of that to fund her presidential campaign in 2007 and 8? They don't want to check that. And there are many, many examples. Powerful billionaires like Gates, the Rockefellers, Bloomberg, they have these massive foundations, and they don't seem to check when their foundations give money to entities that actually don't exist. They don't care. Why would you not care about that? Is it possible that these people are using not-for-profits as a way to trade money for outsized influence over the global government that has no regulation?
Have you ever noticed that mainstream media isn't doing their job? Media's job used to be to protect the people from shady government and corporation behaviors and keeping them in check. But the mainstream media are now protecting them against you. Document News is a 100% free and independent media house funded by the people, working for the people. We'd like to continue our job informing you about what's really going on, so you're not left with media who tells you what to think instead of giving you information to think about. Support us and thus support yourselves and your loved ones. Thank you.
You said earlier, and you've said it before, fumblehead about Biden, the president, Brandon, the president. Now, he obviously has scammed and skimmed a lot of dough for himself and for his family. But he's so, agreeing on the fact that he's not exactly coming across as the most sharp guy in the building, there must be someone else who's benefiting from that. Not only those who pay the bribes and make down payment on favors that he and his family will give him, but there must be someone even bigger behind that who is gaining even more from letting this happen. Who are they?
Well, I think it's folks like George Soros and others like George Soros around the world. I mean, let's face it, the United States in 2023 is very different than the United States in 1782, which had no real industrial economy back then. And today, the United States, for now, with its towering debts and yawning annual deficits, nonetheless is the biggest economy by far on earth. And when the President of the United States and his administration know in advance which direction the federal government's going to take, whether it's on a country or region of the world or an industry. When you know that information is incredibly valuable. When let's say if Chevron and Exxon are competing for leases, offshore leases, and the person who's making that decision of letting those leases out at the Department of Energy knows in advance who he or she is going to pick, that information is very valuable. And so will lobbyists try to pay off people to find out in advance what's going to happen on a new set of regulations or whatever? That is the industry of Washington, D.C. And if Biden were back when his mind actually worked, which it hasn't been working certainly since 2020, based on the way I see him in the public domain and compare him back. I met him actually in 1975. He was sharp as a tack back then, but he's certainly not got it now. And so, yes, Guy, there are a lot of people in this administration, the people who implement the policies of the administration. They have spouses, they have boyfriends and girlfriends, they have children, they have relatives. And the crooked swamp of people around these decision makers is likely taking benefits, engaged in pay for play. And it involves both parties. It's not simply a democratic process. It's probably Mitch McConnell and his family and the Republicans and other Republicans, Mitt Romney perhaps, and many in the Democratic Party. It's an inside game for them. And they know that they're going to make sure we continue to have division in this country. And so long as they can play the game and get these omnibus bills passed, they can stuff their benefits into these bills that are unreadable, and they can continue to play the game. And so long as foreign investors will buy the U.S. dollar, buy our bonds, the game continues. But it's epic corruption.
Epic corruption indeed. And don't we need to mention two other entities that help to smooth the way for this epic corruption, namely big tech and the media, MSM in particular then?
Right. I mean, with big tech, it is absolutely scary how much information people willingly give away to your cell phone provider, to Google, to Facebook and Twitter, and stuff about where you are, what's important to you. Big tech has the ability not to read your mind, maybe, but to know much more about you and provide a file on you to crooked deep state operatives around the world in an instant. Big media is in the decline. We think what you and I have been doing, we've been doing, Jason's been doing. There are many intrepid journalists now around the world who are not going to put out the pablum that the mainstream press puts out in between ridiculous commercials. We're not going to put up any longer, I don't think, with ignoring the real problem just so you can gain access in an interview with members of the various administrations. That's the mainstream media pulls its punches because they're in the business of getting another interview out of Joe Biden, getting another interview out of Mitch McConnell. They're not going to go ballistic when they see corruption. They're going to pull their punches. And so mainstream media is losing its audience. People are cutting their cord. I, for one, actually just moved, and I'm not renewing a television subscription. Just not going to do it anymore. I don't see the point.
You can watch Document TV, Charles, if we get more English broadcasts. On that note, Norwegian viewers may help us out, donate on VIPS 638941. We have a PayPal account, paypal@document.no. And if you look us up on the various websites we have, you'll be able to support us. You will be supporting us if you share this story with as many people as possible, that they know about Charles Ortel, that they know about honest, independent media like us, and diggers and analysts like Charles Ortel. God, we're blessed to have you, Charles. Back to the congressional hearings, a few words on the IRS whistleblowers. How did they come across to you?
Highly credible, highly credible. And what was so disgraceful is the attitudes of the Democrats, who were they were coordinated. They attacked the whistleblowers. They believe, I think, are at the point where they're all in to protect Biden and these dynastic political families. And actually, we also attended, the next day we attended the Robert F. Kennedy interview, Jason and I did. And Kennedy, I don't like his politics. I like some of his points, but I don't like his political inclinations. But he did make a powerful point in his opening statement. He said that his uncle, Ted Kennedy, somebody I revile, apparently, according to Robert, got more legislation across the line than any other senator in his lifetime in modern history. And that was, as Robert Kennedy said, that was because he reached across the aisle and he worked with Republicans for the benefit of all Americans. And that's what he implored the hearing room to do. And instead of that, the opening move of the reprehensible former chairman of the Democratic Party, who was removed for her conduct, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, her first move in a committee that was investigating censorship was to attempt to censor Robert Kennedy in the hearing. That was her first move. And I think these hearings, both the IRS and the Kennedy hearing, showcase how far away from the mainstream of the center of the Democratic Party, how far away the current leaders of the Democratic Party are from Democrats and from the American electorate. I think it is a party blowing up before all to see. We won't really pay much attention to it till September, given the summer schedule. But I think the last 2 days of Washington, D.C. were death blows for the Democratic Party, in my view.
You know what? I think we'll give our viewers worldwide a homework, a task for next week. I realize that it's time we get back on our weekly schedule. We'll work it out with Don and with you, whether it'll be on a regular show on Sundays or not. But the task I'm giving to our viewers is check with your local media. How much of this can you find any word of about the epic corruption in the once unparalleled superpower of the world, the beacon of democracy, land of the free, etc., is a cesspool of corruption. And this is not only in the States, is it a big taboo? It is a big taboo in all countries, so it seems, in the U.S. domain or the sphere of influence dominated by the U.S. in the Western Europe, to take one. So what do you say, Charles, that we try to hook up again for a new broadcast? I know that you will be coming to Norway next month, but we need to have a show before that too. And as I said, we could have kept this going for hours. I just hope, people, that you pay more attention. I'm blessed because I get mails from Charles every day, and it's more than I can read on top of everything else. So, Charles, you have to excuse me too for not replying on all of them. But boy, go in on Twitter, follow Charles Ortel. The Twitter address will be in the article accompanying this recording, and it's not difficult. Charles Ortel. Charles Ort, I think, is your Twitter handle. Charles,
yes.
You have a full Sunday. Are you going to have a show with Jason again today?
I am, and please do follow Crowdsource the Truth too. I will be bringing you information when I'm here in land of the once free, home of the Bumblehead, the USA.
Thank you. See you next week.